Good morning, everyone. Ricardo here speaking. We will be starting our webinar in 2 minutes. Good morning. Here is Ricardo and David De La Rosa from Telit. I am a global VP for Telit. I'm in charge of our factory solutions business, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you today and showing some examples of how we are disrupting the way that companies are manufacturing. And the idea for this webinar is to show some of the latest features of deviceWISE, and we will explore in details how we can connect basically any robot, any CNC, any PLC, basically any type of industrial equipment into Microsoft Azure. So a very quick overview in terms of who Telit is. Telit's a global company. We are traded in London Stock Exchange. We have more than 7,000 customers around the world using our technology to make products better. We have all sorts of quality certifications such as ISO 16000, ISO 27000, ISO 9000. The company is basically a $500 million company in revenue with more than 1,000 employees spread all around the world. The technology that we will be demonstrating here had its origin in the year 2000 inside IBM Industrial Automation Group. In 2013, Telit acquired ILS technology, one spin-off of IBM, when we bring SecureWISE and deviceWISE to industrial IoT platforms into Telit products portfolio. deviceWISE is becoming a real standard in the industry, even though deviceWISE is present in many different verticals, from oil and gas, food and beverage, process and discrete manufacturing. The presence of deviceWISE on automotive market shows the importance of this industrial IoT platform for the industry. Today we have 7 out of the 10 biggest car makers in the world using deviceWISE. I really like this statement from Paul Krugman because this really guides the way that we develop our technology. Productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it is almost everything. At the end of the day, IoT exists only for one thing. Above the hype, it exists for you to make money by creating new disruptive products, for you to save money by making products faster, better, more reliable, and cheaper, and for you to stay out of jail, for you to stay compliant in terms of the regulations of your industry, given your ability to really control in real time what is happening on your industry to do serialization, traceability, and much more. Checking out this McKinsey study, it is very clear that all the economic impact of IoT will be mainly driven by industrial solutions, where operations and optimization and predictive maintenance has the ability of bringing potential gains for customers of a cost reduction between 5 and 40%. deviceWISE is the best product for you to go through this journey, bringing the reality of Industry 3.0 to Industry 4.0. So basically what deviceWISE is. deviceWISE is a software, is an industrial IoT platform that has the ability to convert every single machine that you have from the latest one to the oldest one into a data point, and giving you the ability to intercommunicate this machine with other machines and all the different systems that you have, making a bridge between IT and OT. With deviceWISE, you can bring data basically from everywhere, from the lowest level, such as actuators, sensors, and external instrumentation, to controllers such as PLCs, CNCs, robots, DCS, torque tools, and much more, and integrate this data on a completely bidirectional way to all types of softwares that exist on your IT, such as SCADA systems, MES, ERP, and cloud solutions. Everything on the PowerPoint looks very simple, but when you go to real life, collecting data from different machines might be extremely complex and challenging given the number of different controllers, brands, protocols that you have on the shop floor. When you go to IT, life is not even simpler in IT. You still have different types of databases, different types of softwares, all running in parallel. Up to now, the challenge of connecting all your machines, adding a layer of logic, and pushing this data to IT systems and from your IT systems to your machines involved hundreds or more hours for you to have custom code pushing all this data together. The idea of deviceWISE is to create a completely transparent layer that give you the ability of connecting basically any machine to any IT system. The way that we do this is through our software. Our software has three main pillars. This is a very important slide for you to understand what is the concept of deviceWISE. On the lower end, you have the device access layer. On your device access layer, you have hundreds of drivers for you to simply click and connect anything. Normally, for you to connect any machine is as simple as just deciding what is the driver that you're using, just appointing what is the IP address, and on a click of a button, you have all the tag trees, all the data available for you to read and write. You can also create logic and completely automate this process, this data logistics. The way you do this is with a 4th generation code method where you don't need to write one single line of code. It's just a matter for you to set up, and you can drag and drop blocks of logics and basically push the data from any machine to any IT systems. On the enterprise access layer is where you decide to what type of IT system your data is going to. So for you to communicate, for example, to SAP, you just define what is the connector that you're using, and you can start integrating your machines into SAP. So you can, for example, open and close tickets. You can transport data forecasting from your machines directly to your ERP systems. You can do preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance. And given the evolution of the data analytics clouds that exist out there, clouds such as Microsoft Azure, IBM Watson, Google Cloud Platform, AWS, MindSphere, you also have all the connectors straight from deviceWISE to basically bring data from any machine to your cloud computer. So if you are using, for example, Power BI in Microsoft Azure, you can bring the data from all the machines just by clicking one or two buttons. The idea of deviceWISE is really to bring more efficiency to engineering team. With deviceWISE, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Instead of allocating a lot of time for you to create custom code for data collection and IT integration, with deviceWISE, you have all this done on the state of the art. So your team can be much more efficient and deliver many more projects than you could if you decide to custom code everything. Even though deviceWISE talks all the major open protocols such as OPC, MT Connect, Modbus, and more, deviceWISE has also the ability to natively talk to all the controllers. So when we are talking to a Rockwell PLC, we are not using OPC, even though we could. We are using the Rockwell driver. When we are talking to a Fanuc robot, we are using the specific driver for Fanuc. This gives us much more efficiency in terms of this data collection. deviceWISE not only has the ability of collecting the data, but you also can create simple and very complex projects to completely automate this data collection, as I'm going to give a couple of examples here. All the data that we transport is in real time. It's the fastest way for you to collect any data from any machine. It is the lowest latency in the market. We have all the security allocated on deviceWISE, so you can make sure that your IoT project is properly secured. Here is just one example of how low latency deviceWISE is. In certain industries, the latency can completely kill the productivity of a production line. So deviceWISE has a ultra low latency, bringing the best for your IoT project. So basically, deviceWISE is not only a software, it's not an application, it's a real IoT platform. Being a real IoT platform, you can basically collect data from any type of machine. So as you can see here in this very simple diagram, deviceWISE is a transparent layer that has the ability to bring data from PLCs, robots, sensors such as RFID, barcodes, and anything else, CNCs, torque tools, and even the people that are working on the line. And all this data can be communicated on a bidirectional way on databases, IT systems, HMIs, and cloud solutions. So what can you do with this? You can do all the automation products that you need. You can integrate and automate any machine. So for example, if you have one machine in a production line and your first machine is controlled by a Rockwell controller, and your second machine is a Mitsubishi controller, and your third machine is a Siemens CNC, you can basically make this Rockwell controller to talk to your Mitsubishi controller and talk to the CNC controller, all in a completely automated way. You can make integrations between preventive and predictive maintenance. So for example, you can go for the simplest example, where if you want to set up a preventive maintenance by simply reading what is the manual of that machine, and let's assume that that machine demands you to recalibrate every 1,000 cycles, you can just drag and drop one block of logic and say, deviceWISE, please count how many cycles did I pass through, and after 1,000, send one email to my maintenance manager. Open one ticket in SAP PM or Oracle EBS, for example, and even create one report showing me what is the machine that needs to be calibrated this week. For this effort, you will probably need less than 1 hour to have all this integrated. You also can do more complex type of predictive maintenance by collecting the data from all your machines, integrating to platforms such as Azure or Watson, or any other sort of program that will give you predictive analytics and push the data up and down from these cloud computers to your machines. You can have an online control, quality control, so you can connect your machines to your quality systems. I have a very interesting example here where we helped one customer in the medical space to automate one CNC that was working completely standalone. When we installed deviceWISE in this facility, we integrated one robot to this CNC. So now deviceWISE was letting the robot know when the part was ready. The robot was picking the part on the CNC and displaying this part on a quality control system that was a prober tool doing the measurements of all the dimensions of this controller. deviceWISE was also talking real time with this quality control system. So all the necessity of offset on this CNC was completely handled by deviceWISE. So not only deviceWISE integrated the robot with the CNC, but also with the control tool, writing back the offset on the CNC, making sure that you have a higher quality on your parts that are produced. You can have real-time visualization. As we already showed in our previous webinars, you can use deviceWISE to have a complete visualization of your productivity, having OEE, for example, for every single machine, every single shift, every single operator, all your plant. You can have the complete integration between IT and OT. We can integrate to MES systems like Dassault Apriso. We can integrate to MES systems like Simatic IT from Siemens. We can integrate to SAP, and we can integrate to Microsoft Azure, a very powerful cloud platform, as we're going to show right after. You can have the complete artificial intelligence integration by pushing the data from all your IT systems and all your machines to the cloud, reading the data in the cloud, and pushing the data back into the machines. So here, just a very quick use case that involves the necessity of the cloud. And as we will be showing in this webinar, the focus on pushing the data from deviceWISE into Microsoft Azure. MC Machinery is a subsidiary of Mitsubishi Corporation. It is one company that produces laser cutting machines. They use deviceWISE, and with deviceWISE, they can have a smarter machine. With deviceWISE, you can read all the data from this machine and integrate this machine in different types of on-premises systems, any type of database, any type of IT connector. You can also make this machine to talk to other machines on the shop floor. But when you have the integration with the cloud, you can have a device management. You can let the OEM to have remote access to these machines. So when it's necessary a troubleshooting, when it's necessary maintenance, maybe the engineer that might be in Japan doesn't need to fly to United States just to set up one machine. By using the cloud, we can open tunnels and let this engineer to remotely access this machine and work on this. Additionally, you can have a completely automated data collection, publishing the data into multi-platform data visualization, so customers can have the visualization of the performance of these machines on their hands, on their iPhones, and on their smartphones, and also to have dashboards showing how these machines are operating, what is the efficiency, doesn't matter where they are located. deviceWISE, as I mentioned, can be installed 100% on premises, but also with a complete security layer, you can have this, this plant to cloud connectivity. Well, that was my introduction on the product. Thank you so much for watching. Now I will transfer to David De La Rosa. He's going to show in real life how you do this complete integration. We're going to open the product and show you. If you have any questions, please type, and at the end of David's presentation, we're going to answer all your questions.
Thank you, Ricardo. So when I was asked to provide a presentation, I had assumed perhaps that some of you have some experience with deviceWISE, but just to cover all bases, I'm going to do a very quick high-level overview of what we do, and then proceed with a little bit more detail and a live demonstration of delivering some sensor data into Azure. So just to complement what Ricardo mentioned, deviceWISE is an integration tool that is you could leverage to solve OT to IT connectivity, fully bidirectional. The OT space can deliver data to IT, and I request data from IT to be placed on the OT space. The IT space is broken into two parts: the on-premises IT systems, when customers deploy their MESs like SAP ME or homegrown MESs. And there is the cloud-based ones, such as, of course, hosted on Azure, Google Cloud, Siemens MindSphere, and our very own Telit IIoT platform. So there's two camps. So what I'm going to show you here is basically what Ricardo mentioned. We have the OT layer specified here on the devices section. This is how you define the sensors and the connectors to OT devices. This is how you define what PLCs you're going to talk to, what CNCs, what robots, what other kinds of industry standard equipment like Modbus, BACnet, SNMP, and so on. And the enterprise section is where you define how to talk to a particular IT thing. So we have connectors to basically all relational databases, middleware systems like IBM MQ Series, Microsoft MSMQ, of course, RESTful or HTTP web services, and natively we also support SAP MII and SAP ECC, which is the BAPI-based SAP. So basically, here we do the definition of the devices on the shop floor, generally speaking, and this is where you define the connectivity to the IT systems. In this case, mostly on-premise, but you could also define connectors to, for example, IBM Watson. The project section is where you develop the business logic or the edge logic. And this is where you say, I want to retrieve this information at this rate, do some edge processing. If the data is below such a threshold, then don't do anything. Otherwise, do a transformation and then deliver it to the IT system, for example. So there is quite a bit of custom edge logic that you could do here without needing to know C# or Java. And I'll show you in a little bit how we render this logic. It's basically a flowchart language, and you don't need a giant staff to develop this kind of logic. Now, on the cloud IT connectors, if you notice here, we have a connector to our very own Telit IIoT platform, where you could develop some IoT applications where we do some level of device management, connectivity management. The next one is Microsoft Azure. Many customers use Azure to deploy their business applications. They have relational databases, visualization using Power BI, machine learning, and many other kind of services that Microsoft offers. We also have a connector to GCP or Google Cloud Platform, particularly, or at this time, we have BigQuery. This is where you could deliver all kinds of sensor data from your production floor into Google, and then all machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms run and produces a score for you to optimize or predict things in your factory floor. And then, of course, we have a ThingWorx connector where you could interact with ThingWorx if you decide to, deploy such an IoT platform. So the net is we are a very agnostic platform. You could talk to all kinds of devices, so we're not tied to a particular vendor. You could interact with many kinds of IT systems, and you don't need to deploy a large staff of programmers to realize the solution. It's all point and click. deviceWISE also runs in Windows, but it runs on any kind of Linux 64-bit, 32-bit. It runs on very large computers such as IBM P Series. Runs embedded in some PLCs and run embedded in some cellular gateways where you could deploy IIoT solutions. So it's a very comprehensive, a very flexible platform where you could deploy your business solution. So that being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the features of Azure. So we, in Azure, we support basically all the low-level protocols that you could use to talk to the Azure cloud. So we could talk AMQP, MQTT, and HTTP. This is in case you have proxy situations in your enterprise. You may want to elect HTTP or not, but so you get to pick basically any of the ways that Microsoft supports. AMQP is a very heavy protocol, very reliable. It has a kind of a big overhead, but it is very robust. MQTT is a lighter weight protocol that I would consider using it even if you have like a cellular connection, for example, just because the data plans. And HTTP is a very firewall and friendly protocol. We also support a feature called aggregation. It's also referred to as batching. And the reason is to conquer the latencies. Many shop floors want to deliver data, say, at 100 millisecond rate, like presses and temperatures and things. And because of latencies in the network, particularly going to the internet, you cannot do it unless you do some kind of batching. So we support this concept of aggregation or batching, where you could collect all kinds of samples in a unit of time and then deliver it to Azure, and you can send data at 100 millisecond rate to Azure with no issue. We also support compression. So there are some IIoT applications like on ships, for example, that require satellite communications. So the compression, just because satellite communications are rather expensive, the compression shrinks the payloads, and then customers don't have to pay this huge amount of money. There's a couple of other features here worth mentioning. Stored and forward, we call it SNF. And SNF is a feature that we developed that in the event of a network outage, we will record the data on a persisted storage on wherever deviceWISE is running. And when the connection is back up again, or the transient network condition is gone, then all that data is delivered. So from a business point of view, you will not miss key data because of network outages. We take care of sort of buffering internally. You could specify many kinds of profiles in memory, in disk. You could select how much storage. Is it FIFO, LIFO? So it's very, very granular way to set up the store and forward. And then, of course, security. It's a big deal in IIoT applications, of course. So we support full X509 certificate security. So the gateways are authenticated and the payloads are fully encrypted as they are in flight into the Microsoft Azure. So pretty comprehensive support in the Azure. We also can deliver IoT data or telemetry data or just sensor data into an IoT hub and also to an event hub, depending on how the customer configures Azure. We have the flexibility to deliver data to either one of those two endpoints. In addition, not only we can send data, but we could be the recipient of data sent from Azure into us. So later on, you'll see in our triggers that we could wait for a message to be sent to us to take appropriate action. So you have full closed loop asynchronous communications between the edge or shop floor in this case and Azure. Anybody, any site can initiate, very rich. So the first thing I'm going to do is light up our Azure connector, and I already put here the credentials that you see here. Let me show you on the browser where you will get that. So this is the Azure portal, and then you go to the share policies, IoT hub owner, and you get this connection string here. So this is kind of the simplest. I'm not using certificates for the purpose of this demonstration. So you copy this, then you paste it into our workbench here, and now you are basically connected to the Azure system. In this case, it's an IoT hub. That's what you saw on the workbench and on the Azure portal. So our next step is to do a live, how do we define devices? So it's a little bit of a refresher to some, but if this is new, this is how we define devices in deviceWISE. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect to a Rockwell control logic CPU. And for all of you familiar with shop floor equipment, Rockwell is probably the biggest market share in the US. And what I'm going to do is provide a name. I'm going to call this Azure Live. Just give it a name. Live demo, if I could type. I'm going to call it Logics. Just a name, and then we supply the IP address. It's on my network here. And throughout the product, you could kind of do a quick check. It does an Ethernet IP connection to the PLC, so it's healthy. So we saved this definition, and then we started it. And then what it did is it went to the control logic CPU and retrieved basically the entire data model. So here you have all the control logics tags. You could read, you could write. Mind you that I'm connected as a super user, so I could do reads and writes. But we do support role-based security. So you could create roles and groups with the proper permissions. And on a corporate infrastructure, typically you can connect this role-based security and manage it through LDAP or Active Directory or ADFS. So it will conform to the corporate security. But this is just an example how we define a device, and you could read and you could write. For example, you could read some things and so on. It's very simple, just the IP address and away you go. So now I am also going to define a environmental sensor that happens to be in one of our labs. I'm gonna call it sensor. Then you pick it from the list. It's this one here. And again, provide the IP address. Again, you could validate, make sure it's healthy. Yes, save it. And again, start it. And if you go to the variables now, you'll be able to see the temperature in the humidity and the illumination in that particular office. So 72 Fahrenheit, 129 lumens, and 46% humidity. So that's how easy it was to define devices. So you could do the same thing with torque tools, CNCs, BACnet type systems. So you could look into the data of your facility. You could also connect via SMP to your laser printers and network equipment and monitor the vital signs and take some remediation if needed. So very flexible device drivers. And mind you, these are Windows, Linux, AIX, Raspberry Pi, and so on. So this is kind of the device part. So what I'm going to do next, now that we have devices, I'm going to show you how we get this data and deliver it to Microsoft Azure. So what we're going to do next is create something we call a project. Sorry, go over here. And we're going to call this project Azure Live Demo. Okay, just a project, it's just a container. And then we're going to start that. And then we're going to create our first piece of edge or business logic. And we do that by defining what we call a trigger. So a trigger has two parts. It has an event. When this event is true, this trigger will do some steps or actions, just to show you how easy it is to, for example, if this event is true, you fire an email. That's just a typical, that's the simplest kind of preventive maintenance. If some fault is detected, send an email. But clearly that's not what we're going to do here. So let's go and look at the events a little bit more. So let me name this trigger, send sensor data. So there's many kinds of events in deviceWISE. One kind of event is a time-based event. It could be every second, periodic, for example, or it could be kind of a scheduler, every Saturday, but not in December, for example. This is a type of a time-based event. There's other very powerful events, for example, when a PLC delivers data to you in the form of a transaction. So when the data comes, this trigger will fire, so you don't have to poll the device at all. It's just the device at the edge knows when you need to have the data and sends you the data. Using this mechanism, you can scale very high. You could have 1 or 2 computers connected to 200 torque tools, for example. It can handle it, no problem. Another kind of trigger is a data-based kind of trigger. So, for example, if this Boolean on this control logics PLC changes, you do something. So, very powerful and very rich and comprehensive event. For those that are looking very closely, you notice an event here, Azure. This is when Azure delivers a message to us. Then we will run. This is when Azure originates, and then we'll wake up and then we'll take some steps, maybe turn off a compressor or take some remediation on the edge. So just for the sake of this illustration, I'm going to pick a scheduled trigger, and instead of being a weekday, we're gonna run it every second. Now, the logic, you could do simple data transmissions, but you could do some expressions, you could do some early analytics or filtering and data reduction. So it's not a one-to-one, but you could accumulate data on an embedded relational database that we support, and then only send the data to the endpoint when it's absolutely necessary or when there is an outlier on the data. So just for the sake of a quick demonstration, you open this Azure group, and then you say send telemetry to the IoT hub. Let me center. So if you notice, the deviceWISE went inside, connected to Azure, of course, we're already connected, but more importantly, it went and asked all the possible endpoints available for us on that hub, either the event hub or the IoT hub. And then you could pick them. So the key here is that you do not have to type anything. If you notice throughout this quick live demonstration here, I only had to type names and maybe IP addresses. There is no memory maps, there is none of that needed here. So we did the introspection into Azure. So I'm picking this endpoint here, and what I'm going to do next is select the kind of data that I'm going to send. So let me make this wider, and then I'm gonna copy this here. Let's just say temperature, and this is of type float 4. Let me copy this. This is illumination. And temperature, illumination. Recorded the telemetry data to be delivered to Azure later on. So very flexible logic. So what we're gonna do here is hardwire this, and this is the simple trigger that will get that sensor data to Azure every second. So if it all goes well, you're gonna notice here on the successes that now we have 2 successes. So now we have this sensor data, which could come from a PLC, BACnet, torque tool, CNC, is now being delivered to Azure. So now I'm gonna show you very quickly how that data shows up in Azure. And for that, we get a console prompt here, and then Waiting for Microsoft. Hello. Oops, what happened to this shell? Did I just kill it? It's possible. Well, this shell doesn't want to work today. Let's see, PowerShell bash. Restart Cloud Shell. Restart Cloud Shell. Just give it a moment. Well, this is one Microsoft Azure. So anyhow, sorry guys, I don't know why this shell is not starting, but let me try one more time. Oh, there you go. Connecting to terminal. There you go. So now we have our shell. So what I'm going to look now is, there you go. So here we will be able to see the sensor data coming from deviceWISE. So every second you should see data, and now you have your sensor data showing up. So of course this is a console application, but normally what people do is they create routes and the data is then delivered to the endpoint. For example, Power BI, which is another hour in itself how to configure, but this is how simple it is to get some sensor data into Azure. So that basically is what I wanted to show you today, how to configure deviceWISE to do this. It was very simple to do. There is no programming whatsoever involved here. Of course, you could claim that our Visual Logic is programming, but you don't need to have a computer science degree, just some common sense and have a problem in hand. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ricardo, and I think there is a Q&A section coming up. So thank you all. If any questions, feel free to reach out to us, Ricardo or myself, and we'll be happy to help. Thanks, Ricardo. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. So if you have any questions, please feel free to type us here. So the first question that shows up here is, what cellular gateway support deviceWISE? Basically, we have a very extensive list of cellular gateways that are supported. You can go to help.devicewise.com and find all this list there. But we have Multitech, we have Dell, we have C-Stack, and we have many other gateways available. David, do you want to comment anything on that?
No, you're right. So if you go to our website called docs.devicewise.com and type in supported gateways, you will be able to see all the ones that we support. Some are cellular, some are hardwired, but we support a good amount, and we're always working on adding to our portfolio.
Excellent. We have another question here that is the store and forward functionality available in Google Cloud Platform, ThingWorks, and so on?
Absolutely. So in Google Cloud, we not only support a store and forward, but we also support aggregation, because it's the same latency challenge. And the same thing for ThingWorks connector. We support all of those features.
Yeah, and store and forward is definitely a very important feature that we have, not only when you are talking to cloud solutions, but also when you are talking to local on-premises databases or local and on-premises enterprise systems. And definitely store and forward is an intrinsic solution that we have in deviceWISE. Our commitment is to make sure that you don't lose data because of latency or anything else, because of network issues. So whatever happens to your machines when you are using deviceWISE, you can be sure that deviceWISE will collect it and will treat it properly. So I don't see any other question here on the chat. I invite you to go to this link, contact.telit.com/ deviceWISE/factory/trial, and you can request one free trial of deviceWISE. You can install this free trial in any type of computer. It can be your laptop, it can be a Windows,